In the mid-1990s, the personal computer market was still niche. Large strides had been made by devices like the Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum and the Amstrad CPC here in the UK, among many others. These all attempted to market PCs to a wider and younger audience, and while their attempts were met with some success, the market was still one dominated by those most interested in the medium. Hence, software of any kind was rarely designed with ease of use in mind for mass market adoption, instead coming with huge manuals and the requirement of some basic early computer knowledge. Computer RPGs then, they were just as complicated. These were games for PC enthusiasts, and specifically the kinds of enthusiasts that were also into tabletop role-playing with complex leveling systems, stat checks, combat multiplayers and other in-depth systems. The audience expected complexity. It's not surprising then that RPGs from the DOS and later Windows 95 era tend to be bewildering to anyone with modern sensibilities. Early Elder Scrolls titles Arena and Daggerfall likely intimidate the modern player from the off with their in-depth character creation and relatively high difficulty, from an era where a Souls-type game was just called a game. This series so far has utilised the Unity port of Daggerfall, an ambitious project that took an aging relic straight into the 21st century, boasting capabilities that would have blown the minds of gamers back in 1996. And while I made it clear back in that first video that the Unity version is by far the superior way of experiencing the game, until these last few years, the Daggerfall experience was not so simple. It would be unfair of me to analyse a game for so many hours and mostly ignore its original state. So let's take a journey back in time to play the original emulated version of the Elder Scrolls 2. The DOS version of Daggerfall was released with high system requirements for the time and was notoriously buggy, both aspects of which didn't help it with reviewers. Yet despite these setbacks, previous fans from Arena, alongside those enamored by rumours of its immense size and unusually long development time, dove into one of the grandest fantasy world simulators ever released. The game received a fair amount of awards over its release period, and was certainly not obscure, obtaining a level of fame, or in some cases infamy, among hardcore PC gamers. Ion Storm even referenced the game in their design document for Deus Ex, except it was used as an example of what not to do, calling the game wide but shallow. So why is it now, after all these years, that Daggerfall is receiving more love? Well, the household name that the Elder Scrolls has become may be one reason, but the other is the Unity version. Here I would like to preface that I love Daggerfall. The last few hours of video should show as much, but man, the original version of Daggerfall has simply not aged very well. Now there may be some bias here. I'm a 90s baby, and my first gaming experiences were on the more focused PlayStation 1. So while games like Crash Bandicoot may share the same release year, they don't share the same audience, budget, scope of design, nor hardware. Yet those games are still very playable all these years later. With that said, Daggerfall is simply unpleasant to play after all that time. As one gets used to how modern games or iterations of games feel, going back to the classic way can be difficult. I will note that some of these problems may be due to emulation through DOSBox, but seeing as this is the main way the majority of people can experience this classic version nowadays, these critiques are still valid. The movement for one is uncomfortably clunky, becoming more fluid in the full screen mouse look mode, but still plagued by odd stoppages and hiccups when swinging your weapon. The game also feels slow, clearly limited to a lowish frame rate, and even loading between areas in the overworld or when entering a building can take a good while. Graphically, there is of course poor visual distance, but this isn't all that uncommon to some of the other games in the series, and honestly it helps add to the ambience. The weather effects at times can be a bit too extreme though, this fog being a prime example. Sound design is also more grating. Sound effects can play far too frequently or at odd volume levels. This is also accompanied by some bugs. For example, I had this rogue electronic note in dungeons. The default controls are a trip too, allowing you to play the entire game using only a mouse, which makes it feel even older than it is. This is an optional feature for those more accustomed to that style of CRPG design though, yet it is weird that they would make it the default, as by 96 this method was already on the way out. Even more strange is that for some reason, controlling Daggerfall using these controls feels far more cumbersome than it did in Arena. It might have something to do with it being retroactively bolted onto a more modern engine. Daggerfall's X engine was designed with modern 3D world spaces in mind, so forcing the player back into a scheme better suited for the faux 3D of Arena was unnecessary. The wilderness was also more boring. Of course, Daggerfall's vast procedurally generated open world is empty by modern standards, but this original version does not use the topographic measurements that were included in the game's files, resulted in the outside world being entirely flat and only having small polygonal triangle mounds to simulate the ground. The Unity version corrected the issue by using that unused topographic information to its full advantage, helping the landscape of the Iliac Bay to come to life, with hills, cliffs, lakes and all the other features you would expect to find in the countryside. This flatness of the landscape combined with the fog of war harms the sense of such a huge world too, an area in which that all-important sense of scale that Daggerfall prided itself on is crushingly diminished. The game at launch was also super buggy and in a bad state, and this wasn't just your common haha funny Bethesda glitches, but game breaking problems. In the UK version there was a bug in it that meant one of the key dungeons later on in the game didn't appear on your map, so you literally couldn't complete the game, unless you could manually find the dungeon, which with the scope of the game world is all but impossible. Issues like these aren't so much of a big problem today, you just release a day 1 patch and fix it. However, in 96, the internet was still in its infancy, so the only way to receive patches was via floppy disk or CD. Even Bethesda's modern day freeware version off their own website isn't ideal, missing patches and tools to make the game more accessible. Before the Unity release, the UESP version was recommended for its inclusion of the Eye of Argonia tool, which extends the draw distance, albeit mildly, and it includes all official and some unofficial tweaks and bug fixes, such as making the Baronzaya Dark Elf family actually be Dark Elves. They were originally not green/grey in appearance, despite the player's choice of Dark Elf being so. When analysing Daggerfall over this series, I was worried that perhaps I was seeing the game through rose-tinted glasses, looking over shortcomings that others may see, but it is in playing the DOS version that I see that wasn't the case. The many laurels I have attributed to Daggerfall are deserved when they are not hampered by the X engine and the issues associated with such a dated game. The design philosophy was solid, and it is by modernising said philosophy into an updated engine that allows the game to shine in a way that it never could before. I first played Daggerfall in 2014 and struggled to even get out of that first dungeon, and honestly, I don't believe I would have ever picked it up again if not for the tremendous effort of a man down in Australia, one Gavin Intercomma Clayton. Clayton had been tinkering with Daggerfall since the late 90s, being a fan of the original game since release. As a veteran within the Daggerfall scene, and having worked in IT for just as long, he was the perfect man for the job. While the Unity version went through the standard affairs of early pre-alphas that all such fan projects tend to do, with the project started in 2014, after just 5 years in 2019, the first feature-complete alpha of Daggerfall Unity, or DFU for short, was released. While the Unity version continues to be updated in the pursuit of perfectly replicating the original in terms of its classic graphic style, the game is all but done, boasting everything you would expect, from modernized controls, a smooth and fast playing experience, a lack of bugs, and, most importantly, mod support. Modding is a hallmark of the Elder Scrolls, and while some tools such as the Eye of Argonia did exist for the original version of Daggerfall, modding the X engine was a very limited experience compared to what fans would become accustomed to with Gamebryo in the future titles. So it is by utilising the user-friendly Unity engine and opening the game up to modding that Gavin Clayton has given us the gift of an Elder Scrolls 2 with the modding capabilities that one expects from the series. The modding community may not have the size of even Morrowind's, but those that do mod the game are very dedicated and have created many excellent mods. These add new, more dynamic quests, improved graphics that make the game look relatively modern, improved music, taking the old MIDI music from the DOS version and giving it the orchestral treatment we all love about the modern games. And then there are the role-playing enhancers. These add monsters into the overworld and interesting sights to see in said world, making it actually worthwhile to walk around and not use only the fast travel. Combine these with road mods and a speed changer and you're well on your way to giving yourself a more modern Elder Scrolls experience, but in a province the size of the UK. Basically, DFU is the way to experience Daggerfall. The only reasons to play the DOS version would be for nostalgia or to see what the original was like, but for me, I see no reason to ever go back except for morbid curiosity. The Unity version makes Daggerfall far more approachable to the modern Elder Scrolls fan, which is what this video series is all about, showing newer fans that it is worth going to check out the earlier games, and not just stop at Morrowind as so many do. Hell, even I did for the longest time. Where Morrowind was cut back with a low budget, desperate times and endless passion that allowed it to excel following the reviews and knowledge they had from their previous games, Daggerfall was made with grand ambition in mind, using forward-looking ideas and a groundbreaking scope, but it was unfortunately hampered by limited technology and a short development time. And it is these reasons that the original DOS version simply doesn't hold up where other retro games like Doom do, considering it would struggle to stand out from the 100 other sword and sorcery RPGs if you were to glance at a screenshot or even the back of the box feature list. Daggerfall's greatest surprise is how experimental its design is. From those procedurally generated dungeons which seem more like a product of 2016 than 1996, to the lack of guidance and the sheer scale, which have little in common with almost any other RPG in existence today. Daggerfall doesn't just shoot for the moon, it shoots for Pluto. It's weird, unforgiving, and often uncomfortable, but there's a reason it has such a stronghold over those of us who love it. Few other games can provide power trips, window shopping, and a claustrophobic sense of horror side by side, and with 1,000 other possibilities in between. Daggerfall doesn't restrict or guide, it allows you to exist and make whatever you will of its world. There are well-written characters and plot lines to uncover should you choose to chase them, and there are good reasons to play if you're excited about Elder Scrolls history and lore. But even outside of that, its random RPG roguelike nature offers a gaming experience that feels oddly modern, if not very Elder Scrolls as many may know it now. Daggerfall shines with its overzealous ambitions of what a game should be. It attempted, and not always successfully, to incorporate Vampire the Masquerade style undead tribes, political scheming, espionage and demonic infiltration. And behind all of that, an RPG system that completely rewrote the rules of its predecessor. The Elder Scrolls series has seemed much more conservative since. Even the beautifully strange Morrowind is far more focused and traditional in its goals. A fair criticism of Daggerfall would be its lack of focus, and not only for the player, but in its design. Its limited array of building blocks used to construct the towns and dungeons caused reviewers to complain about the game's monotony, and they were right. Over time the game can become samey without the help of mods or a focused role-playing imagination. It, like many other classic RPGs, relies on how much you're willing to invest into it to learn its quirks and truly fall in love with its retro charm. These are problems that Bethesda themselves took years to course correct from. Redguard's and later Morrowind's design took a dramatic shift away from procedural generation, but retained Daggerfall's core ambition to simulate a whole world, but with passion and focus. Morrowind's landmass is tiny next to Daggerfall's, it doesn't even amount to a full percentage point in comparison. but it rightly chooses depth over breadth. Machine-designed levels were no more. From Morrowind onwards, everything in Tamriel was placed there by hand, and the continent did become all the richer, albeit smaller for it. Daggerfall isn't everyone's cup of tea, I know that, but I personally rank it just below Morrowind for the best Elder Scrolls game. It's at least worth giving it a try. The game is free and available for all. I wish we can see some of these deeper RPG elements return, but Bethesda is clearly keen on continuing to streamline, which financially seems to be the best course for them. The mantle has fallen onto other game studios to carry on Daggerfall's legacy. But for now, Daggerfall Unity's unique combination of massive scale, limitless quests, vast array of content, exemplary character customization and computer role-playing elements, along with its engrossing atmosphere and ambience, make it one of the most compelling games to fully immerse and lose yourself in. It would be unfair of me to have a video called The Age of Daggerfall without mentioning the current controversy regarding the actual Age of Daggerfall. If you aren't aware, Double Negative has made a video in which his research has uncovered some discrepancies on the release date of the game. His findings show that not only did the game release later than what some sources originally showed, but that the industry as a whole, including Bethesda and the original devs over at Once Lost Games, had gotten wrong. And honestly, I have to commend Double Negative for his work here. He went above and beyond to prove himself right. Ironically, we were both conducting the same research at the same time, as I was writing the script for my Making of Daggerfall video then. I had even noticed that different sources mentioned different release dates, but I naively put it down to regional differences. So to tie up any controversy on the date, I agree with Double Negative with his conclusion of the release date of Daggerfall being the 20th of September 1996, and not the originally believed date of the 31st of August. Thanks for watching. This has been one hell of a series, but it isn't done just yet. I have learned a lot over the last couple of months, and want to sign off this excellent game in the best way I can. So I'll be taking these 8 parts, correcting the mistakes some of you have pointed out within them, and we'll be re-editing and rewriting them in places to create an epic 3-hour plus final film. That will be, for now at least, the definitive analysis video for Daggerfall on this platform. I look forward to seeing you there.